Tell me when you're getting that.
Got it.
And let's start the same way as before and just invite any questions. I was commenting to somebody that you probably would find this text more difficult than the others. Certainly the style of Greek is higher in 1 Peter than it has been in Matthew, or even more so for Mark and John. So this is a more complex style. Moving towards the upper end as far as the New Testament style is concerned, Hebrews probably being the most stylistically high-level Greek in our New Testament. Okay, so any questions, stuff that's vexed you as you've gone through this, particularly in terms of grammar and translation?
I mean, Kevin, just a kind of an initial comment, I guess, at the beginning of any of these, these salutations and farewells. It is very interesting that many of them don't have any verbs in them, and yet in this particular case there is a verb right at the end of verse 2. But yeah, just an interesting thing that you have these sentences that have no verbs in them at the beginning of most of these letters. Yeah, I mean, I guess letter writing conventions are so well established, and that you don't really need verbs for the most part. So the inclusion of one year, and you probably had to scratch your head a bit to figure out that it's an optative. There are so few of them in the New Testament that most grammars don't bother to cover them formally. But yeah, good comment. Okay?
That was going to be my question. Why is there a verb ending with an eta? Because I couldn't find any verbs ending with an eta.
Yeah, this is optative, so we didn't study them. That's why it wouldn't have looked familiar. And I'm pretty sure that there are about, if memory serves, there are 68 optatives in the New Testament. So can we do a quick morph search and tell you? Search all morphological text, all passages. Let's see if we can quickly search for verb, optatives, and go. And I must confess, I have never bothered to learn them. There are 70 hits for optatives in that quick search, so really not too many. And quite a few of them are in stock phrases. Me genoito, Paul's favorite God forbid, or may it never be so, accounts for something like 18 of the 70. So we can see plethynthea, we've got one in 1 Peter 3:14, pas hoite, another one in 3:17, and that's it for 1 Peter. So not a lot of these. Proportionally, there we can see, if I scroll back to Romans, you keep getting the stock phrase me genoito, which is kind of may it never be, or something like that. It's the strongest expression of that that's available in Greek. Okay, so very few of them, Marilyn, and we didn't bother, as indeed almost all first-year Greek courses barely bother, to pause and look at the optative formation. The assumption is that there are so few, and you can just look them up when you bump into one, that it's not worth memorizing diagnostics.
Sorry, if we want to at some stage go on and maybe start reading the Septuagint, would it be worth our while studying the optatives?
That's a good question. I don't have the answer. I have recently started reading the Septuagint. Let's go and check. So we'll do the same exercise by opening a Greek Septuagint. Let's
do a morphology search for @verb and choose optatives. Let's see how many we're going to get. 577, bearing in mind that the Septuagint's probably 3 times as long as the New Testament. So it would seem again they are not going to be optatives in most chapters of the Septuagint, but they are a bit more common. So what's going on here is that if you go back into classical Greek, you had the 4 moods, the 4, your indicative, subjunctive, imperative, and optative. And the optative and subjunctive were both moods of uncertainty, but the subjunctive was closer to reality than the optative. The subjunctive would imply, some expectation that something's going to happen or so forth, whereas the optative is more the mood of a wish or a hope. It's further removed from reality, is how I remember it being explained in the grammars I read. But by the times of the New Testament, most of the places where an optative would have been used have been replaced by a subjunctive. And that would have taken several hundred years. So if we assume that the Septuagint is translated somewhere around about 200-300 years before the New Testament, then the slight increase in frequency would be consistent with its gradual decline. So there'll be 500 if you tackle, or say 600 if you tackle the whole Septuagint. Okay?
Thanks.
And if we go into the Apostolic Fathers, let's try Lake's Apostolic Fathers. Do we get a morph search here? Should do. Yeah. So if we try the same search for the Apostolic Fathers, so yeah, we're looking at post-New Testament. Come on, I want that. 52 occurrences in what would be a fairly substantial collection. Okay, so that gives some idea of what we're looking at. Article, reference, search result. Presumably that's just... what are we getting? All right, so that's more or less where we're at. It's largely fallen out of use by the time of the New Testament, slightly more frequent in the times when the Septuagint was translated. Okay, good comments. Other? I don't think it's hard to learn, although I've never bothered to try. But I don't think it's hard to learn. It adds an iota as the primary diagnostic to most of the forms. There's an additional iota added. So you'll often see epsilon iota, or let's go and look at them again, omicron iota. So @verb, question mark, oh, should do it. So if we go through them, you're going to see oi and a, where the iota has been added. So theloi, yeah, there we go. So generally speaking, your diagnostic tends to be an iota that's added.
An interesting is that what is called the evaluative optative, which then lends itself to be translated as may peace and grace to mark.
Thank you for that. Obviously, you've done some digging here. Okay, good stuff. So, yeah, I mean, if you're looking for ideally covering everything, it might be worth learning it. And I don't think it's hard to learn. It's just not something you're going to see again and again in every chapter. Back to 1 Peter. What else vexed you or interested you? Okay, don't all shout at once.
Kevin, yeah, just a quick question just around I've noticed that some of the translations, especially, where there's a perfect or in other cases aorist, they don't necessarily translate it in the standard fashion, if I'm making sense. And even when there's a passive, so sometimes what they seem to do is they translate it, like a perfect more like an aorist, or an aorist more like a perfect, with the have and the has, and so are there reasons for that? Are there any other kind of rules that we need to be aware of? And I know obviously in the assignment we would go with what we've learned, but I have noticed that often that there seems to be an overlap between the two in terms of the translation.
Yeah, you can't translate rigidly and produce something that is sensible. It just can't be done. So, as much as one might aspire to always translate a genitive using of, and to always translate an aorist with a simple past and a perfect with a past perfect, for instance, it just doesn't work. So, what translations do is they try and produce a natural English flow that is faithful to the sense, and in some cases, so translation philosophies that value maintaining form will try and remain close to the form wherever it's possible, but it just isn't possible in so many cases to do that. And probably a text like 1 Peter 1 will expose the gap between form and meaning a little bit more than some of the earlier texts, because you do have some turns of phrase in the Greek of 1 Peter that are further from the literal form than you're going to get in Matthew and Mark generally. So Gary, it's just trying to capture the essence of what you're seeing in the original and conveying it faithfully in the English. One's not trying to produce translation English. You're trying to produce natural English that conveys the same sense. And I don't think you can avoid that. I think it just is necessary so often to change the form of something, slightly anyway.
Okay, great, thanks.
All right. So,
can I ask you a related question, just in terms of our final translation? One thing that I've struggled a bit with was exactly where to pitch it. Should I be more interpretive or more literal? And I tend to try and be as literal as possible, but not overly literal. But I wasn't sure for which audience should I translate it. Should I translate it for myself? Because, for instance, if I'm preparing a sermon, I'm going to translate it a bit more literally than if I'm translating it for someone, just a normal, average, modern English speaker.
yeah, I don't really mind, Henny.
Okay.
Pay your money and take your pick. So I'm not too phased. What's very difficult, surprisingly, is to be consistent.
Yeah, it is.
So it's very difficult. So what you will probably find yourself doing is being hyper literal in some places and pretty free in others, and chopping and changing without self-conscious awareness as you go through.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't mind. I mean, this isn't this isn't at that level. I'm more curious, or more. The only thing that I mind is that it would be good for it to be your own translation as much as possible. We can't get away from familiarity with the text entirely. So you are familiar with English translations of this and so forth. But it is good to try and do it yourself and grapple through the difficulties without consulting translations until you've tried your own.
Okay. Just
All right.
another question while I'm speaking. Another thing I found a bit difficult, and then this text highlighted it again, was just the prepositions. I mean, in verse 1 and verse 2, you have a couple of prepositions being used, and I find it very difficult to translate them. There seem to be multiple options which could all work. The kata, the in, the ace, and so on.
Yeah, I think that's fairly common. And it's helpful in lots of respects to think of prepositions as broad general markers of relationships. So what we're trying to do is figure out what relationship is being pointed to here, and how do we convey that in English, as opposed to necessarily wanting to stick to form throughout. So what have we got? Petros apostolos Jesu Christou, Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ. Eklektois parepidemos, to the elect, scattered, I guess, from the dispersion, a whole bunch of places. So we've got kata prognosin theou, according to the foreknowledge of God. So all of this seems to go back to eklektois. So kata is pointing back to, eklektois, I think. They're elect. Kata prognosin theou patros, according to likely. En hagiasmo pneumatos, in the sanctification of the Spirit, or by the sanctification of the Spirit. And ishupakoen, kairantismon, cleansing, sprinkling, imatos Christou Jesu. So maybe, where's that thing? Just give me a sec to open something here, if I can figure out where. There. Oh, that's not going to come through on your screen. Okay, never mind that. All right, so what I think we've got is a very interesting little formula with these prepositions. We've got three prepositional phrases, each, I think, elaborating on their election, their electness. So their elect, the kata phrase seems to give us the basis of their election. The en phrase, the means of their election. So it's by means of the sanctifying work of the Spirit. And of course we've got a Trinitarian flavor to the three phrases, suggesting that they are parallel. And the eis or is phrase, eis hupakoen kairantismon, the eis phrase seems to give the intended result or goal of their election. So their elect, eklektois, we've got a basis in kata, a means by en, and a goal by eis. And the parallel nature of these being very Trinitarian, patros, pneumatos, and Jesu Christou. Often hard to capture these in translation. Okay, shall we jump into verse 3, or are there other questions you've got? Doesn't seem like they are burning questions. Fairly familiar by now. Eulogetos, hotheos, kai pater, tu kyriomon Jesu Christou. So blessed be, or may be, the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. Ha, kata tu polou, autou eleos, anagenesas. So ha construes with anagenesas, ana again, and genao, to be born, and I think it's causative. So the one who has caused us to be born again. And by putting the prepositional phrase kata topolou autou eleos between the article and the substantive, in this case anagenesas, that it's governing, by putting this whole phrase in between, what the author has done is to convert this whole phrase into an attributive modifier of anagenesas. So it's the one who has caused us to be born again according to the richness or greatness of his mercy. According to his great mercy is probably best. Hemas, the direct object of caused to be born again. Is elpida zosan, unto. So S is often giving you the result, or at least the intended result of an action. So he's caused us to be born again, resulting in our having Elpida Zosan, a living hope, through Anastasios Jesu Christou, through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, ek nekron, out of the dead, from the dead. Happy?
So Kevin, just in terms of what I asked just now, that's an aorist. It's not a perfect. And so, the way I translated was he caused us, as opposed to he has caused us. I don't necessarily see too much of a difference in its implication, but obviously in its translation, the question,
which can be significant and helpful if you think in Greek. So if you are using your English translation as kind of a veil to be able to look at a translation and say, all right, this was translated as a simple past, ergo it must be an aorist. This was translated as a past perfect, ergo it was a perfect. If you're looking at your English form to be a simplified diagnostic of what lies beneath the surface in the Greek text, then it's desirable to try and keep those sorts of distinctions. Most translations are assuming, rightly, that the person reading them will not know or be interested in an underlying form in an original text. So they're fairly disinterested in those kinds of distinctions. You'll also find that you cannot do it consistently, Gary. So there are going to be times when translating it as a simple past, you can do it, the one who caused us to be born again is fine. But there will be times when your attempt to maintain that formal distinction will simply be too awkward to defend. There's nothing wrong with doing or with maintaining that distinction whenever it's plausible. So, there's nothing wrong at all with you saying, whenever it's possible, I'm going to translate the aorist with a simple past and the perfect with a past perfect. Present perfect, I think, is the English form.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay, so absolutely fine, So, blessed be God, ho theos, going back to ho theos, the one, according to his great mercy, caused us to be born again. Into, meaning with the result that we enter into. So ACE often has a resultative outcome type orientation. So in a sense, it's resulting in living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. Eis again, eis kleronomian, aphtharton, kai amianton, kai amaranton. Three adjectives heaped together just to describe kleronomian. So again, we're now elaborating by means of a series of prepositional phrases on our being born again. And makes for great preaching, by the way. So God has caused us to be born again, and one could make your main points a series of prepositional phrases. So elaborating on our being born again, it is according to, and kata often giving you the basis of something. So the basis of our regeneration is the mercy of God. The result is living hope, and the means is through the resurrection of Jesus Christ. There's a simple 3-point sermon. Is, meaning into. Again, notice the result notion of es, because all of this results in our having an inheritance, which we now have a whole bunch of descriptors of. It's incorruptible, it's undefiled, and it's unfading. Determinane.
Sorry, Kevin, can I just say and ask something concerning ACE, please?
Sure.
Wally says the ace in verse 2, followed by an accusative, is there to show result, which then obviously is translated as resulting in. But these aces all are basically followed by accusatives, which also, as you said, basically shows result. Is that a good pointer to look at? Ace followed by an accusative shows us result. Would you say that?
I think it's often the case, particularly in argumentative literature. You know, if we were looking at a narrative, then ace often means somebody got into something. He got into a boat or he went into the house. So it's often simply physical motion when you're looking at what people are doing. But when you are reading something that's argumentative literature, as the epistles are, frequently the broad frame of reference of ace is to tell you the outcome of something. So it's often logically giving you the result of whatever's being argued or discussed. And I think we can see that fairly logically in the occurrences we've got here. So if we're thinking of our calling to be elect, Christians if you wish, you know, it's fairly easy to understand ace hupakoen, for obedience or unto obedience, as an outcome of being elect. We're called for the purpose or with the intended result that we would become obedient and, of course, cleansed. And yet too, if we come back here, you know, so regeneration, anagenesis, into a living hope. So you could argue that it's into the sphere of living hope, but I think logically what that would imply is that when we are caused to be born again, the result is that we enter into a living hope which is received through the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Our living hope is that as Christ was raised from the dead, so we shall be raised from the dead. Yeah, so frequently, particularly in epistles, your ace clauses are going to give you some kind of logical outcome that flows from whatever it's modifying. I haven't looked at the grammatical categories for this, such as you'd find in Wallace, for a long time, so I can't remember them. But if one's reading and saying, you know, what is the preposition indicating as far as relationship? Remember, prepositions are relationship words. They're indicating relationships between two things. In a narrative, it's often two physical things. In an argumentative text, it's often two logical or conceptual things. And frequently, is is going to be giving us result, as frequently kata is going to be giving us basis. So I would argue that both the katas here are basis. So kata, prognosin, according to, means on the basis of foreknowledge. Kata, eleos, means on the basis of mercy. So I would tend to think of our prepositions as marking relationships and try to understand the general type of relationships that the different ones indicate, without too often wanting to go and look through 27 listings of possible nuances. You know, that becomes unbearably onerous. All right, so te menen, from te reo, we can kind of see the verbal root there. It's easy to recognize the reduplication for the perfect, men for the marker of the passive participle. So here it means kept in heaven. So just as these are adjectives elaborating on kleronomian, so the participle is functioning as another adjective. Our inheritance is kept in uranois es humas. Es humas here meaning simply for you, no connotation about result. Just a way of saying for you or unto you. Tous en dynamitheu, frurumenus. So even if we don't know the word, we can see the men. It's likely going to be a middle passive participle. This u, when it precedes a participle morpheme, is likely from a contraction. So if you looked at this, you would probably be able to guess that we're going to find frureo, or less likely frurao, as our root, and indeed we'd find frureo if we did double click. So to watch or to guard, it's passive, so it's for you, tous, the ones, frurumenus, being kept, tous frurumenus, the ones being kept, en duname theu, in the power of God, by the power of God. I don't think it's going to matter terribly much whether you take n as sphere or means here. The point remains the same. The power of God is keeping and preserving and watching over humas, you. Dia pisteos eis soterian hetoimein, ready, apokalypthenai. We can see the passive and we can see the infinitive morpheme. So apocalypse, apocalypto, to be revealed in Cairo eschato, in the last time. I see what you guys mean about the compounding of prepositional phrases. It's here in abundance, isn't it? So we've got again tous frurumenus, the ones who are being kept, and we've got 3 prepositional phrases that are giving us different dimensions of their being kept or preserved or guarded. N is giving us the sphere, or perhaps means. It's by the power of God. Dia is definitely giving us through faith. And ace, again, is giving us result. The result of being guarded by the power of God through faith will ultimately be a salvation that will be revealed and thus received in the last time. It's a preacher's heaven, this, man.
It's not so good for translating, though. Preacher's heaven, but not translator's heaven. It can bring a nightmare.
Yeah, granted. I'll concede that point. Notice he's done it twice now. So we've got ho, anagenesas, and we've got 3 prepositional phrases, kata eleos, according to mercy, on the basis of eis elpida and di anastasios. All 3 modifying caused us to be born again. Maybe the third one's modifying eternal life, living hope rather. But the first one he put between the article and the preposition, and the next 2 following it, and I see he did the same thing again here. So the first one is directly in the predicate position, attributive position. The next 2 are lumped together in the afterwards. So, but all 3, in a clear sense, are modifying the participle. You are being kept, continuous sense, in or by the power of God through faith unto salvation. And then this is modifying salvation. Okay? Fun. Enho, in which, the relative clearly pointing back to the time factor here, in ho. Agaliaste. Am I right? In which you rejoice. Am I right? That's surely, what else can it be pointing to? Must be.
So it must be because the sentence is nothing to rejoice about.
Well, I'm expecting a future tense agalias there, so it's ready to be revealed in the last time. So if it's in the last time, then in which one expects you will be glad or you will rejoice, but this is clearly present. So in which you rejoice. I guess if it's a living hope, we can rejoice in what's going to be revealed. We can rejoice now in what's going to be revealed in the future. So I suppose it does make sense. But I was my hesitation was I was expecting a future tense verb. So anyhow, in which time you rejoice, oligon arti ideon lupeithentes, to suffer or to be in pain in various trials, etc. In a documonumantes pisteos pollu timoteron. This is an interesting use of the genitive. So pollu timoteron, being of high value, and here in the comparative sense of greater value. When you've got something that implies a comparative sense between two things, quite often the genitive will be used to complete the thought. So here we've got of greater worth. That's the comparative form. So it's of greater worth, and chrysiu, of gold, literally, but in English it's of greater worth than gold. So this genitive is used to complete the comparison. So it's the testing of your faith, and it's your faith that is polutimoteron chrysiu, of greater worth than gold. You obviously can't render literally as of greater worth of gold. Diapyros, de dokimazomenu, Eurethe es epainon kai doxan kai timein in Apocalypse Jesu Christu. Alright, so in which time you rejoice. Oligon, remember we introduced this word very early in our little conversations when we started our journey, meaning a small number, a little. Now, so if a little now, deon is problematic. It's from de, which is impersonal, so de is the sort of third person singular, and deon is the participle, always neuter. If it is necessary, lupeithentes, clearly passive, clearly aorist passive, and clearly a participle. So if now for a little while, lupeithentes, not the main verb, it's pointing to something that happens prior to the main verb, antecedent time, lupeithentes, having suffered or been in pain in all kinds of trials, or various kinds of trials. Hina to dokimion, in order that the genuineness, dokimion, eumontes pisteos, of your faith, polutimoteron chrysiu, of greater worth than gold, which perishes, I think, through fire. What's the fire modifying? Diapyros, de dokimazomenu. What's the fire modifying, folks? Is it gold that perishes through fire?
That's how I
think
had it.
I think it's gold. So of gold which perishes, diapyros dokimazomenu, through fire being tested. Now I'm not sure if this is referring to our faith being tested through fire or the gold being proven through fire.
Doesn't Apolumenu refer to refining rather than perishing?
Good question.
So I think if BDAG mentioned something about the transitory beauty of gold.
There we go. So there it is. If you're a Logos user, I've just upgraded mine. Cost me an arm and a leg, but there's some nifty new features. One of them is on the filters in a lexicon, one can emphasize active references. So have a look here. The 1 Peter 1:7 reference is highlighted in my Logos, right, within BDAG. If I turn that off, that
That's
would
much
cease.
quicker than how long it took me to find it in the manual one.
Yeah, it's very nifty because especially on these long entries, one can sift through it, and it can be quite a pain to try and find the active reference. So if we go back to that, now it will highlight it again. So at least we can find where BDAG thinks it fits, and sometimes you'll find it more than once. Okay, so BDAG thinks it fits here. Of things to be lost, pass away, or ruined, of bursting wineskins, fading beauty, of course that's not happening to any of our ladies, or transitory beauty of gold. It does mean to perish. So the point is, it's of greater value than gold which perishes or fades or passes away. Dokimazomenu must surely mean tested, proven, or refined. So this is the refined part, which passes away but is being refined through fire. So we should again be able to find our reference just by searching for the highlight. Okay, where's it? No, don't see it. So possibly our text is, oh, there it is. Why didn't it reference it? To prove by testing of gold. Yeah, okay. All right, so the interesting little dangling preposition here needs a bit of time. Quite possibly, which is perishing, seems to almost be despite being proven by fire. Although it's been refined by fire, gold still perishes. But your faith is of greater worth. Eurethe is epainon kai doxan kai timen. So it would seem that it's the gold that is the referent of both of these. All right, so this is a bit of a head scratch. So that the tested genuineness of your faith, more precious than gold that perishes, though it is tested by fire. Dokimion. You can see the same root here. All right, I think I've got it. So, in order that the genuineness of your faith, or the proven genuineness, the tested genuineness in the ESV of your faith, and then we've got a comparison of greater worth than gold which perishes, even though it has been proven, refined through fire. So even gold that is of the highest standard and has been well purified is of transitory value. It's perishing and fading away. But the proven genuineness of your faith is of greater value than gold. Eurethe. Notice we haven't had a main verb, so Hina would have caused us to look for a main verb. Here it is, and we can see that it's going to be subjunctive. Passive subjunctive may be found. Eis, again, to result in. May be found unto epainon, praise and glory and honor. Notice again the logical, in fact ESV actually translates it, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor. In Apocalypse, in the revelation, at the time of the revelation of Jesus Christ. Fascinating. Okay. Fascinating, fascinating, fascinating. We probably need to leave it there. I want to show you one or two more quick features of Logos. I'm not trying to sell it to you, but it has been a valuable tool. So those who do use it, if you have been dabbling with the newer versions, there are some nifty new tools for language study. So let's say we just take at random frureo, this word here, and I choose the lemma. So I'm going to run a lemma search and I want to do a Bible word study. There are a couple of useful features on this word study thing. One of them is root. So it will give me a listing of, it claims that frureo is built on the root horao, which we know means to see. The root is used 520 times in different forms, and it'll now give us a listing of all the words that are built on that root. This is perhaps not the best example to work with because they might be a smidgen obtuse, some of these. Let's try a different one. So what was I doing yesterday? Let's take arch. Change my word study to archon, which I can see is built on the root archo. And it'll now give me all the words that are built on the root arch, meaning to begin, to be first, or to rule. The root occurs in different forms, 475 times in the New Testament on the basis of these words. Archi, Hiereus, Hiereus means priest, so arch, to rule, begin, or be first, means first priest or ruling priest, hence high priest. Archo is the main verb, to begin or rule. If we go down, chili archos, chilias means 1,000, so chili archos would be a ruler of 1,000, a military tribune, somebody in charge of 1,000, high-ranking military official. Hekaton arches, a centurion, literally hekaton 100, arches, a ruler, so a ruler of 100. Archaios, ancient or old, the root arch meaning to begin, so from the beginning, the original. Ap arche, first fruits. How do we get it? Well, from apo is from, and arche, first, the first from, or the beginning from. So the first from the womb would be the first fruits. The first one out of the crop would be the first fruits. So it's literally first from, ap arche, first fruits. Archi, synagogos, obviously, synagogos, a synagogue. Archi is the ruler, the person who's first or rules in the synagogue, a synagogue ruler. Archegos, now you need to recognize egos as ag. From ago, I lead. So an archegos, the first leader, would be the founder or originator of something. It's a great way to build vocabulary because if I scroll down, you'll see a whole bunch of words that are built on the root arch. And so by focusing on roots, one can unlock quite a lot of vocabulary relatively quickly, and a lot of these words you'd be able to figure out pretty logically how they are built upon their main root. Okay, so that's one useful feature. Another useful feature, particularly for verbs, is Logos has introduced a thing called a morphological chart. So this is a noun, but anyway, if I click on it, it's going to do this. Now you probably can't see that. Okay. So what it's going to do is open a chart of all the forms of whatever word I'm studying and how many times they're used in each case, tense, etc. Quite a nifty little tool just for seeing how a word is formed in all different cases, declensions, etc. And the last one that I'll point out is textual searches. So I'm looking at archon. This obviously depends on what books I have in my library, but you can see usage of this word in the Septuagint 620 times, in the New Testament 37, in the Apostolic Fathers only 16, in Philo. These are what I happen to have in my collections. So I could now go and say I'd like to look at all occurrences in the Apostolic Fathers, and I'd be able to find how this word is used in early Christian literature that's pretty close to the New Testament. So quite a lot of powerful tools anchored to this little word study thing. Okay, folks, I think it's open to the last forum and the last phase of the journey. So just again, if you do want to send me a sample of your assignment translation to check that you're on the right page, you're welcome to do that. Some have, some haven't. But I don't think we'll have another formal meeting related to this class. I will send you an email and invite you if we are able to get the ongoing Greek study session off, and obviously it would be nice to have you attend if you can. So thanks. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, everyone.